From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hi again. Welcome to the show. I'm Ken Davis. Remember when Pat Quinn said he thought that he was put on earth to fix the Illinois pension mess? Well, the fates seem to have aligned perfectly for him now. The various state pension plans are all combined a couple of $100 billion in the hole, and interested parties on all sides are pointing at each other and issuing statements of blame. So maybe it was greedy unions demanding more and more from the public trough, or irresponsible legislators who promised things they never funded. But maybe, as Glenn Brown said recently on his blog, the lack of revenue across the country today was caused by the theft of billions of dollars by speculators and bankers in the private sector. They're nodding already. But since the election, Pat Quinn has two realities to face. Mike Madigan and John Cullerton now have veto-proof majorities, so they don't really have to work with him if they don't want to. And the people have spoken, rejecting a referendum that placed limits on how public employees could be granted increases in their benefits. Oh, and the Civic Committee yesterday said that the pension mess is so unfixable that you're just going to have to give up on it and give nobody any money or whatever it is from now on. So, and then, oh, by the way, in 327 precincts, Chicagoans told Mayor Emanuel by about an 87% vote that they don't like him appointing the school board, and the mayor makes it official that he wants marriage equality in Illinois, but he wants that new casino first. All right? So, we've got people here who I think can help us understand these things. I'm talking about Fred Klonsky and Don Washington. Don Washington of Mayoral Tutorial. Glad to have you back on the show. Fred Klonsky is, of course, a blogger, retired teacher. Glad to have you both here. I checked this morning with the Tribune to see if you were on the list of people who Rahm Emanuel takes time. I didn't see your name on the list. There's lots of people, but neither of you guys. So you're not as influential as I thought.
Well, we're not allowed on. I can speak for me. I shouldn't speak for Fred. I'm not allowed to talk to Rahm Emanuel.
Oh, you're not?
I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm sure of it.
All right.
Sure of it.
Well, so you want to start with this pension thing? I mean, there was a referendum, and Fred, you were out there beating the bass drum like nobody's business to tell people to vote no on the referendum, and they followed your lead, and they did it.
And they did.
Right.
That's right.
So now what? Okay, that's defeated. Now what?
Well, let's go back for that for a second. I mean, I think the important thing on this is that that the no votes on the issue, about 1.7 million votes.
Mm-hmm.
If you voted and you pulled the ballot, it was the first item on the ballot. And if you read the explanation, you didn't know anything about the issue before you walked in. The wording, it was a 700 word constitutional amendment that Madigan got all of the state legislators to vote yes to put on the ballot. If you read that brief summary on the beginning of the ballot, it basically told you to vote yes.
Yeah, it was like, would you like to stop the price of pensions going
exactly.
up? Yeah.
So the no votes, those 1.7 million no votes were informed voters. Mm-hmm. I mean, you had to know what you were doing to vote no. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a powerful kind of stealth vote that exists in the state.
Yeah.
Those are people who are either in the pension systems themselves, or have family members who are in the pension system, or know people who are in the pension system. And those people are spread out in every legislative district in the state. Mm-hmm. And it's something I think that legislators have to be wary of. Now, they're going to have a veto session now. Yeah. Whether this issue gets brought up or not is not exactly clear. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of lame duck state legislators who do strange things in veto sessions, and so it's kind of hard to know.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get done then, Madigan and Cullerton and Quinn will want it brought up in January, and we're going to have to mobilize those 1.7 million and get a few more to stop it. If Madigan gets his way to cut cost of living increases, or deny access to health insurance to teachers, or shift the obligation to local school boards, which would be a terrible thing in terms of teacher salaries in the future. All these things will do nothing to solve the almost $100 billion liability that the state has. It just doesn't solve the problem anymore. Then it just doesn't solve the problem. That liability will still be there, and they're going to, if it passes, it'll go to the courts. The courts will most likely find that it's in violation of the wording of the Constitution that says that our pensions are protected, that they cannot be diminished or impaired, and it will end up that they're going to have to address as you quoted Glenn Brown. It's they're going to have to address the funding issue. You can't cut away from the $100 billion
I
debt.
think the thing I want to make sure that's really clear here is that pensions are a promise, right? They're a promise. And why is it okay for Madigan and Quinn and those folks to blithely talk about breaking a promise to workers, right? Public servants, just blithely talk about breaking that promise, but it's not okay, right, to break a promise to the banks and financiers who got us into this mess, right? It's very clear that to get to the funding thing, you're going to have to we're a rich state, we're a rich country, and all the money is bottled up with the folks that actually caused this pension crisis. Let's help them. Let's liberate that money and send it back to where it belongs. We are a country, and we are a series of agreements with each other that we want a certain kind of society. And the people who benefit most from it are the people who are hoarding this money. We should bring back a financial transaction tax and be done with it.
There you go.
It's really simple to fix.
What was interesting, I thought, Fred, about the referendum was that the opposition to it was on all sides. I mean, even business interests were saying, no, this is not. This is crazy. This is not really a fix.
It became an orphan. It became an orphan.
Yeah.
Madigan pushes it through the legislature. Like I say, gets every rep to vote in favor of it. Every Democratic and Republican representative in the House votes to put it on the ballot. Every state senator votes to put it on the ballot except 2. Quinn says it's going to be the basis for his grassroots movement to solve the pension problem. And they all disappear.
Yeah.
The only ones that are for it, the only ones who come out in favor of it, is Ty Fainer and the Civic Committee. Oh. The interesting thing about Ty Fainer's statement yesterday to the press that the pension problem is unfixable is that here's a guy who, when he was Attorney General, under the governorship of Jim Thompson. Under the reign of Jim Thompson, it was the worst time for funding of state pensions of any governor.
You mean the
fund
was the point at which the state was putting the
They
least
went
in.
on a holiday that makes Christmas and Thanksgiving and Hanukkah seem like it went from paying 90% of their obligation to 30% of their obligation, while Ty Fainer was the Attorney General. Now Ty Fainer goes on Chicago Tonight on WTTW, and he says that if an employer in the private sector were to do what the state did to their employees and not pay, say, into Social Security, and we don't, as state employees, we don't pay into Social Security and don't receive anything from but if a private employer were to do what the state did, they would be indicted.
That would be him.
That would be him. So he would be, as Attorney General, he would have had to indict him. I think Romney talked about self-deportation. This would have been self-indictment.
And that didn't happen, if I recall.
No, it didn't. It didn't happen. Okay. So now he comes in and he says, I got a folder here. I got this folder. It's a 1-inch folder here that shows that the pension system is unfixable. I'm not showing you what's in the folder.
It's magic.
It's a
magic.
Binders and folders have become kind of interesting these days.
Yeah.
So he has a folder. He doesn't say what's in the folder, but he says it's unfixable. But he was the Attorney General under Thompson when we actually got into this mess of unfunding, of disfunding or unfunding the pension
I mean,
system.
I think it really has to be, you can't say this enough times for the public to understand this. It's not a question of just simply that all of a sudden all of these pensions showed up and we can't afford them. This is ridiculous. We've got to take them away. They have been contracts that have been signed over periods of decades, and the legislatures or the governing bodies that signed these contracts have refused to put their piece of the money into the pot.
Well,
Isn't that
That's
inaccurate?
That's it.
That's exactly
Right.
right. And it's gone back for 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
While state employees, teachers, for example, pay almost 10% of their salary and have paid it every paycheck for all that time. And the state legislature has taken pension holiday after pension holiday to do what? To pay for bridges and to pay for other infrastructures and to politically protect themselves from raising taxes, and at the same time giving tax breaks to the folks down the street here at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and Sears and Boeing and these other places.
I think we have to also be very clear that what's really happening here is that we have an underfunded government. We have an underfunded society, right? We're trying to get by society on the cheap, right? And as long as that's true, then you're going to find people trying to find ways to take shortcuts. And one of the shortcuts is, well, a pension holiday, and it pushes it down the line, all that kind of stuff. But I do have a question that's sort of, this is a question to both of you. This is just my question. Maybe it's a question to everybody who's listening or watching today. Why do people take the Civic Committee and the Civic Federation or Foundation, why do people take those guys seriously? There is nothing civic about the Civic Foundation or the Civic Committee. They are a bunch of corporate hacks. They are not a nonpartisan, interested, good government group. They don't like government. Why do people take them seriously? Does anyone know why people go to them to talk about public policy? They hate public policy. That's the point of their existence.
I'm unable to answer that question, and I don't see Fred jumping in with an answer to the
Well,
question.
I do.
So
Well, I
it
don't think
remains
they're
there.
I don't think they're exactly nonpartisan. I mean, it's true that the problem in it, the partisan issue in Illinois, is that we have a blue state. We have the bluest of
Blue?
blue
I
states.
don't know if blue even describes it.
We have the bluest of blue states. We have a Democratic governor, and now we have a veto-proof Democratic.
Supermajority.
We have a allegedly Democratic mayor.
Yeah.
And it's here in this state that the unions and the contracts, the obligations that are made to working folks are under the sharpest attack. Not in the way that they are in Wisconsin or Michigan or our neighboring states, but in a Democratic Party
but
way.
Can
So the Civic Committee has played a role in that. They hand out cash to. I mean, you go down to Springfield, and Michael Madigan sits in the corner he's got his table at Saputo's Italian restaurant across, down the block from the Capitol building, and he sits there like Don Corleone, and these guys come in. You go in, or they whisper in his ear. They whisper. I mean, it's like something out of The Godfather.
But it speaks to capture. What we're really talking about, the blue state thing, it speaks to capture. The Republican and Democrat, the parties don't matter. What matters is the capacity for the quote unquote the 1%, our corporate friends, to use their money to simply capture the government.
Well,
that's what's happening.
But we do have a situation now, and you can talk all you want about the history of how we arrived at this mess, but we do have a situation now where people who are the taxpayers in Illinois are saying to themselves and to their family, what the hell? What's going on here? I lost my job. I certainly lost my benefits. I'm now an independent contractor for $9 an hour, doing the same damn job in the same building, and all these public servants, all these firefighters and teachers, they're all just getting these nice big fat.
Yeah, but that's just
I don't want that
that's
anymore.
just divide and conquer. That's nonsense. We shouldn't be talking about punishing. We shouldn't be talking about punishing the public workers for the fact that our economy has become financialized. We should be talking about making our economy work for everybody.
But are you willing to concede that there is a deep frustration on the part of the so-called taxpayers in the state of Illinois and in the city of Chicago, everywhere, that they're seeing that their lot in life is decreasing, that there's almost no prospect for it coming back anytime soon, and they want the same thing to happen to public employees.
But
I don't see why they should be protected.
No, I agree, but what we're talking about here is that what's happened to the private sector, right, is that it's been cannibalized, it's been eaten whole, right, by corporations that have wiped away union protections, wiped away good middle-class jobs, wiped away good working-class jobs in this whole financialization piece, or where they're exporting things and and basically devouring, right, the base of the economy. That's what's happening. And the only thing that's left are the public workers who have public unions. They're the last guys standing before a third world country. So the people who are frustrated, who are regular taxpayers like myself, we shouldn't be up in arms about how good the people have it who still have public jobs. We should be up in arms about the fact that the people who run our economy and run our politics are so dysfunctional that they're turning everybody into what amounts to wage slaves, while they're concentrating huge benefits at the top of the income ladder. It's ridiculous. We're the richest country in the world. There is no reason for us to have this kind of inequality and oppression.
And it's also not true. It's not your description of what those in the private sector feel about public sector pensions isn't true. The Tribune ran the poll. It was prior to the election. They asked the question, who is to blame for the pension mess? They said the politicians in Springfield are to blame for the pension mess. Mm-hmm. They asked, do public employees deserve their pensions? The overwhelming number said public employees deserve their pensions.
We just voted for
so it. This notion that somehow those working folks in the private sector are somehow taking it out on public sector workers isn't supported by the facts.
One of the most heartwarming things about the CTU strike, of course, was seeing the outpouring of just ordinary folks saying, "Wait a minute, these are the teachers who."
So here's where I think I disagree a little with Don's suggestion, which is a transaction tax. I think is not a bad idea, but the actual solution to the funding problem in Illinois is for the legislature to enact a progressive income tax. It makes no sense to think that you can fund the state of Illinois by taxing those who make the least the same as you tax those who make the most. The notion that Penny Prisker, who owns the Hyatt Hotel, gets taxed at the same tax rate as the housekeepers who work in her hotel doesn't make any sense. You can't fund a government by taxing those who don't have any money.
What about cigarette tax? We could just add another $1.
Maybe a bullet tax?
That would handle it. And a bullet. So, again, in the interest of moving things along, the other thing that was on the ballot, which might move us into other conversations, is this 87% favorable, or what would you call it? It was against the idea of having, or it was in favor of an elected school board, against the idea of Mayor Emanuel handpicking his school board. Now, of course, it was only in 327 precincts, and that is a half-hour show on itself about how it came to only be in those precincts. But in the precincts that it was in, there was a very clear, I would call it mandate to say, no, we don't like the way our school board is being picked in Chicago. So now what happens? What does it mean?
Well, it means that now, from a legal point of view, now it has to go to the legislature. It has to, the change in the law has to be done in the legislature, but the fight for it has to be done here. So now it means taking it back to those communities where and expanding it beyond the precincts and the wards where the vote took place. I know I went out and it was a great experience because I went out door to door in the Logan Square area, and I didn't have one person knocked on one door where anybody said no. In fact, I talked to, like, say, Mrs. Rodriguez, who served on the local school council, and when I told her that we were collecting signatures for an elected school board, she goes, "Oh, I was on the board. It was nothing but trouble. I had fights with this person," and then she signed it.
Absolutely.
And then she signed it because she knew that for all the problems of what that democracy brings, we had this conversation last time I was on your show about issues of whether we really want people like Joe Barrios running our school board. Right. But the fact is that in people's gut, they know that that's a better situation than having Penny Prisker to make those decisions.
And I think I want to make sure I say this. I don't want to forget it about the elected school board. It's a broader question, really. What people are really upset about, right, is not just that there are these 9 unresponsive folks that are on the school board, right? They know that they're uneasy with the direction that the schools are headed. Mm-hmm. They know that They know that there's not enough money right now to make sure every kid in Chicago has a textbook or a clean school or a library, and they know that, right? And they know they want to start having some say over what happens. And they know that random school closings are happening. They've either been a victim of it, they know someone that's been a victim of it, or they've heard about it and they're afraid it's going to come to their school because they're not affluent enough or whatever the case may be.
And every one of the activists that were involved in the collection of signatures and on the getting out to vote for the school board are also the same people that are working around the plan to close 100 schools. It's all. They were the same people who were supportive of the teachers when they went out on strike. So these are all the part of the same. It's all part of the same movement of democratizing.
Right.
But I have to raise this again, just because I am. This is one of these areas where I'm so completely, deeply conflicted. I just don't know what I believe. I mean, really, I don't. Because I fear the idea of having a school board that's fully and completely elected. I mean,
what do you fear about it?
I fear it as much as I fear what we have now. Because I don't think that it will be democratic in the least. I think it will be immediately purchased by the people who have the power to purchase these things, and it'll be worse.
Well, I think the thing we should remember
I would rather have an elected, no, I don't really mean this, but the argument is I would rather have an elected mayor who's at least accountable every 4 years of making those decisions than have than have Karl Rove decide.
But let's be clear what we're actually asking for here, right? When you ask for an elected anything, what you're actually volunteering for is an endless fight, right? You're just volunteering that you're going to care enough about this body to be directly engaged in it. The higher voter turnout, the more people are engaged in it, then you won't have these problems. It's just like any other political system. The more alienated and further away people get from it, the more it becomes purchasable, the more it becomes reflective of the people who have powerful interests that never go away.
So tell me how it doesn't become like the judge elections?
Because it involves people's children.
Okay.
People are not going to lose interest in their own children. And I think that's really at the core of it. And you see things in other elected school boards on a panacea. It's a place where people have big street fights. I mean, look at what happens in Texas. Look at what happens in, and when I say Texas, I don't just mean the state. I mean all the little school boards all over Texas. They have some places that teach criticism, some places that don't. Right? It's real democracy, and it's very skin and bones kind of stuff.
There's another. Let me add one other point to this. We are the only city in the state of Illinois that doesn't get to elect its school board. This is a minority school system serving mainly minority families and minority parents, mostly African American and Latino. It is as much a right to vote as it was an issue in 1965 when they passed the Civil Rights Act, allowing for the first time the right to vote for Black folks in the South. It's simply a denial of the right to participation in a democratic system, to say that only mostly minority people in the city of Chicago are not allowed to choose the people who run their school system. Everyone else can do it, but not folks in Chicago.
I'm not comfortable making the argument against the idea of allowing democracy to flourish. I understand that.
And yet
I make it because it's my job to But I guess we've kind of beaten this one to death many times here. But it does remain, I think, a very serious issue that there might be the rule of unexpected consequences.
Yeah, but I think that we have some expected consequences that today, you were just showing me today the front page where Manuel's meeting with all these CEOs and all these, when I say all of these, let me be clear, half of the people that I read on the list are all associated with the various charter schools and various ways of funding charter schools and making money. So what we're really talking about here is a $5.3 billion budget.
Yeah.
We're talking about a $5.3 billion market for those guys. And let's just another way to look at this is democracy is messy, and it's angry, and it's funny, and it's at times heartbreaking.
The worst system in
Right.
the world, except for
all the
yeah,
other systems,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But what it does is it allows people, if they really care enough, to really have their values become legislative and law. But it also is a huge impediment to if you want to turn something into a market.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that's
yeah.
what we really are seeing here.
Well,
is that Mayoral wants to make it
and
into a
also,
market.
I mean, I think one of the things that I think seems to be very clear is that there is, I think it's safe to say, there is a sort of a public revulsion right now against the kind of perceived privatization of the school system with charters and everything else that is making this issue more prominent, because people are saying, wait a minute, these decisions are being made by hand-selected people that we had nothing to do with, and at the very least I want the ability to organize against these people and throw them off the board if I don't agree with what they're doing, but I don't even have that.
Yeah.
So
Well, be careful, Ken. It sounds like you're changing your
no,
changing your views.
I told you I'm deeply conflicted. So all right, we got about a minute
It's
left.
a Romney-esque.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll take either side. Just elect me. I can argue either side. The funny joke about the Republican activists getting together and saying, we're going to need to run a campaign in 4 years that's 180 degrees from the one we ran this time, and Romney stands up and says, I can do that. All right, enough of that. He's the poor guy, leave him alone. So we've got about a minute left to evaluate the tenure of Barbara Byrd, I'm sorry, Barbara, you know who
B?
yes, Triple B. Barbara Byrd Bennett, my man just went blank. She seems to be starting off at least on the right foot. She seems to be making the right approaches. Are you impressed?
I think it's too early. You know, I think we have to wait and see. From my view, we have to wait and see. I think the problem in Chicago is that it is tied to the conversation that we just had. That as long as the mayor is in the position to make these decisions, I'm skeptical that any CEO is going to be able to act independently. But certainly Karen Lewis and the CTU is willing to give her some time. I think that's what we need to do.
Well, she has been saying some interesting things, not the least of which is that she's going to want to look at closing some of the charters that are underperforming, which I'm sure is not going over well in some quarters in the administration.
I think that's all fluff.
You do?
Because, well, there are two things I look at for every public official. The first rule is past performance is the best predictor of future activities. And her past performance is that she is deep in the pocket of corporate interests. She's very interested in charter schools. She always gets very chummy with the people who have power, and she has ridden upward and onward by getting closer and closer to this quote-unquote corporate school reform movement. And the last thing is that what are the public policy things that they're actually pushing? What are they saying? And what she is saying does not match up with like good education policy.
Well, we're going to have to, obviously, we will be staying on this conversation. I know that for sure. I want to thank you guys both for being with us today. It's been an interesting conversation, and we're out of time, Fred. We're out of time. Don?
Let's go another half hour.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, right. Tell the affiliates that we're going to run a little over, as Ted Koppel used to say. Thanks a lot for being here, both Fred Klonsky and Don Washington. You have been watching Chicago Newsroom, of course. You know that. It's a community service of CAN TV that you can find right here on cable, just any old time. But if you want to see us at your convenience, you go to this address right here and you can see it online. You can watch the whole show. You can also subscribe on iTunes. You can listen to the audio podcast. We plug this all the time. It's a real good thing to do. Thank you very much. Looking forward to Thanksgiving. Hope you have a wonderful holiday weekend, and we will see you next week on Chicago Newsroom with a panel of young people talking about what they think about all of this. So watch us next week. Talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.